everybody, Ben with Virtuous here, and we are going to switch gears a little bit from our usual conversations. Today, we are going to be talking about donor acquisition. And I know we are usually harping on retention and how it is always easier, cheaper, more efficient to retain a donor than it is to acquire a donor. All of that is still true, but that doesn't mean that we can ignore acquisition, right? It is still a really critical part of our fundraising success. Think about it like this: we can't retain someone unless we have acquired them as a donor first. So there's going to be a lot of different ways that we can look at evaluating our donor acquisition. Honestly, it's going to be pretty variable. It's going to be pretty unique to any given organization. I'm going to give you some starting points that you can use as more of a runway to start evaluating your acquisition, and then a couple of different ways that we can break it down further to get a better idea of where our success lies. So, first question, how can we get a little bit of just an initial pulse check into our donor acquisition, right? Still just looking at the tip of the iceberg, but what's kind of a place that we can go more quickly, easily, as a bit of a low-hanging fruit to get that insight? And in Virtuous, at least, we can go to our responsive dashboard. Now, remember, this is a standard dashboard. It comes pre-built with Virtuous. It is meant to be your mission-critical metrics, and of course, acquisition is going to be one of those. I'm going to draw our attention to actually two graphs here. These are going to be looking at acquisition in slightly different ways, just giving us slightly different perspectives into what we're seeing. The first is going to be on the left here in lapsed versus new. So this is giving us that month-over-month change, really the net change in our donor pool. How many folks are we acquiring? How many folks are lapsing? Of course, we want to try and keep that in the net positive, but we're kind of able to see how that fluctuates throughout the year. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, we will also see our net active donors. Somewhat similar, right? We're still going to see that month-over-month comparison. We're still getting insight into our new donors, into our lapsed donors, but we're also seeing how that stacks up against our net active donors. So this is to give you that idea of what slice of the pie are our new acquisitions, right? Of all of our donors, how many of those are actually going to be new to us? Now, you might be thinking, all right, I don't always necessarily want to have to crunch those numbers looking at a graph. Maybe I actually want to see these on a broader basis, perhaps an annual basis. We can do another quick crunching of those numbers using some queries. So we'll start by jumping over, and let's just begin by casting that wide net. We want to see all of our active donors this year because we're ultimately going to look at that acquisition rate for this year. So there are a few ways that I could actually query on this. I might say, hey, everyone's last gift date was, we'll say maybe on or after this calendar year. Right? That would give us everybody who gave a gift last time this year. I might also say, hey, instead, their year-to-date giving or their year-to-date gift count, I'll go with giving for now, is going to be greater than 0. Right? All of these are going to give us the same results. It's just folks who actually gave a gift this year. I will emphasize that these are all based on dynamic date ranges, in this case, this calendar year. If you wanted to have a more static grouping, so let's say all active donors for specifically 2024, that's an instance where you would actually go and build a gift query that was looking at that static date range. So all gifts 2024, the gift date has to be between the first of the year, the last of the year, and then we could nest that in our contact query to give us that set grouping. Hey, all active donors for this year specifically. For now, we'll stick with the dynamic date range though, and this is going to give me just over 5,600 contacts, just over 5,600 active donors for this year. Now, the next thing we have to do is figure out, okay, who among those donors is new, right? Who have we newly acquired? So to build that query, also just a contact query, this time we're going to say, okay, that first gift date, everybody who gave their very first gift, again, between the first day of the year and the last day of the year, those are all of our new donors. This is going to give me 370. So we just take those 370 divided by 5,635. That is going to be our acquisition rate. Now, same thing. I hear you. We don't always want to have to crunch those numbers, always have to run our queries to give us that report metric, right? If it is mission critical, it's probably something that we want to be referencing more frequently than pulling up a couple of queries is going to give us. So this is where we'll actually reach for Virtuous BI. And Virtuous BI has two standard reports that are going to be focusing on acquisition. Again, standard, they come with the BI system. You don't have to build these yourself or anything. These are going to be new donor acquisition and donor acquisition performance. Just like those two graphs on the responsive dashboard, these are actually looking at acquisition in slightly different ways. So we'll start with new donor acquisition. This is really looking at where we are most effective in getting that donor through the door for the first time. So it's really focusing on just the genesis of that relationship with our new donor. Hey, which of our channels is most effective in pulling in those new donors? Maybe specifically which solicitations, right? Which campaign is best at pulling in those new donors? We're saying, hey, how are we actually getting folks through the door with us? And then, of course, we'll see that broken down a little bit further. Maybe what's the average or the median of that first gift amount based on the month, right? Where during the year are we seeing the biggest first donors come in? And we'll see a little bit more breakdown here for some averages across their lifetime. Now, if we switch over to donor acquisition performance, this is looking a little bit beyond just that first step, right? Just that first gift. It's looking at more of the prolonged relationship with that donor. Here we're saying, okay, which of those donor acquisition channels is actually giving us the biggest return on that initial acquisition? So think about it like this. We might have a channel that's really effective at getting those first donors, really high number of first donors, but the donors that we're acquiring through that channel generally giving pretty small gifts, and generally we are not successful in retaining them. If we think about that compared to a channel that is maybe pulling in fewer donors in terms of raw quantity, but the donors that it does acquire are actually giving more and they're sticking around longer, that is going to be the more effective acquisition channel. So that's what we might want to just invest our efforts in further. So that's what this report is meant to give us more insight into. We will still see those more bird's eye view metrics. Hey, first-time donors by month and that first gift channel, very broadly first-time donors by channel. But now we're going to start seeing much more specifically, okay, what's the median number of days between that first and second gift? Or what's our conversion rate based on those different channels? If we scroll down, looking more at the amount, right? Median and average first gift amount by channel versus the median and average second gift amount by channel. Because ultimately, this is our goal. It's not just to acquire new donors or measure how effectively we're acquiring those new donors, but it's to figure out, hey, where are we successful in acquiring donors in a very sustainable way?